Hi, Misha here, and I thought it would be fun to kind of look at the entire TIE fighter series from Sinar Fleet Systems. And we'll start with kind of the four that look basically the same. And then we'll move into specialty and advanced craft in the series. And we'll have a mix of Hot Wheels, titanium, and Black Series titanium, die-cast models, toys, what have you. And first up, we have the concept or prototype TIE. This is from Hot Wheels. It's based on concepts featured in the original script from 75 or so. And one interesting thing, this craft was actually entered through the back originally. Kind of a porthole hatch in the back. Kind of reminds me a bit of the Russian Soyuz craft. So in universe, the TIE was a very advanced fighter designed. Work began really at the beginning of the Clone Wars, but the first prototypes really weren't ready to go for testing either till the very end of the Clone Wars or right after. And the idea, these were to be space superiority fighters, and they were built around a new ion engine, hence the twin ion engine TIE name. These engines were to be just more efficient, simple, easy to operate, just overall good engines, and they were meant to be powered by these solar collectors. In initial testing, they had the two laser cannon, simple, easy to do craft. But early on, these were not meant for atmospheric flight. They were space only. And their design was made such that several could be stacked in the hangar bays of ships like the Venator, the Acclamator, or later, of course, the Imperial Star Destroyer. In the real world, this, again, was a concept, pretty, you can tell, kind of simplistic, but it's neat that they did it. It does have a few differences. It's very simple on the struts here. Has the kind of dotting on the top for maybe sensors or something. But the original TIE would quickly give way to the TIE LN, or TIE Line Fighter, which is the one we know. This is from the Titanium series. And this is the one seen all throughout the original trilogy. In universe, the way they were able to get this to be capable atmospheric flight was they reinforced the spars leading to the panels, strengthened this up here. They also switched the hatch from being in the back to being on top. And it does open on this one, so you can see. And these did not have landing gear, but they could kind of land on their wings, solar collectors if they needed to. They had two laser cannon. They actually had pretty good sensors for what they were, and they were quite fast and maneuverable for such a mass-produced craft. They could get up to about 1200 kph, which in our world is not that fast, but in the Star Wars universe is. No shields, no hyperdrive, titanium hull armor. They could take one or two hits before blowing apart, but they relied on speed and agility to just not be hit at all. This was kind of something tried out during the Clone Wars with things like the Delta 7 Ether Sprite and the ETA-2, the Jedi fighter, as well as the V-Wing and what have you. Of course, these were just produced en masse, and the standard Star Destroyer would carry 72, or at least could. Definitely a simple, iconic design. And originally it was supposed to be blue, or at least kind of a blue tint to the hull, but because of the blue screen tech in 1976 when the film was being recorded, they kind of shifted it more to gray. The more blue tint kind of came about for ties in Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, this would be the full production version. Comparing these, this one is, again, titanium. It's all metal. Wings, ball, everything. The only plastic on it is the actual door, the hatch. But this, from Hot Wheels, being a much newer, the center part is metal, and the soda collectors are plastic. Now we're going to move forward to the new sequel trilogy and the First Order. This is called the TIE FO for First Order, and if it looks a lot like the standard TIE, you are correct. It really is. It's still about the same top speed, 1200 kph. It does have a rudimentary shield, not exactly a strong one, but enough. So it has the hatch on the top, as you can see. Still no hyperdrive. Still really no independence from their craft. These could hold a couple of days of oxygen and maybe basic consumables, but since they did not have any of these ties so far, life support on board, you had to wear a spacesuit, essentially. Flight suit. It had the 2 lasers. It also had the option of bolting on a secondary weapon system. It wasn't standard, but it could mount, a missile launcher or maybe an ion cannon or tractor beam. It also had more advanced sensors. It had more efficient power capture, power cells. It had, just a little bit more refinement, a little bit more effectiveness. But it's your basic TIE, honestly. And finally, for our first set, we have the TIE SF for Special Forces. Again, it's used by the First Order. This is very similar. This too has a slightly better shield, but still pretty primitive. It does have a hyperdrive, but a relatively slow one. It's around a class 2 or 3. For slightly longer range Special Forces missions, it does have about 5 days worth of consumables. Its top speed is about 1250, maybe 1300 kph. It has the 2 laser cannons as standard. But it also has, if you flip it around in the back, a second seat for a gunner or observer or what have you. And he can operate a laser turret. Also, this does have an ordnance launcher. They can have concussion missiles, mag pulses, or even miniature proton torpedoes. So that's really its biggest improvement. A basic hyperdrive and an actual onboard ordnance launcher with, again, a turreted laser system for defense. That's really about it. Even though they're called Special Forces, they're pretty much just a line TIE fighter. And these are all about 6.5 by 6.5 meters. And the original ones are about 7.5 meters tall. The First Orders are slightly taller at about 8 meters. Kind of gives you a range there. And these last 2 are from the Black Series titanium. So you can see the different ones. So yeah, these are the standard ties. What about kind of the next step up, the specialist, let's call it? It had a pretty basic shield, but at least it had a shield. And no hyperdrive. And no life support. It had 2 standard lasers and 2 heavy lasers. And it could also support missiles if fitted for them. It was actually quite speedy as well, able to get up over 1500 kph. And it was also meant to be more of a pilot's space fighter. It had a better control layout, more responsive controls, and it had a reworked viewing port from the old style TIE to give a better, less obstructed field of view. And these were launched en masse from Star Destroyers. So they were designed to be mass produced, but you know, it's kind of like the modernized TIE Interceptor here. And the heavy lasers were good for punching through weaker capital ship shields or just knocking a starfighter out in one go. And again, that's kind of the last of the second line here. This one is again from the old Titanium series. It's pretty much all metal wings. It does have... I'm not actually sure if this one has an opening canopy or not. Oh well. Pretty neat. I've always been a big fan of the Interceptor. I think it's just a thing. And this one, as you see, doesn't like to stand up. And this is from Hot Wheels. It's actually pretty neat too. The body is metal, and the outer winglets are metal, with the inner being plastic. I think the reason it tumps is it's relatively heavy, and so much of the weight is kind of forward here. It must be better if it sit on the stand backwards. Let's see. No, but didn't want to. It can only sit on the stand one way, the way where it likes to tump over. So yeah, there we have kind of our second generation. These were all mass produced, but maybe we're given either to pilots with special training, like the bomber or the striker, or to more of the elite pilots, the best in their class, like the Interceptor and the Dagger. But with that, let's move on to the advanced series of TIE. These are kind of the next step up the ladder, both in terms of specialty and the pilots who had them. And first we have the TIE SA, the TIE Bomber. And it actually had some variants, but the initial one here, it's about 8 meters long and a little over 9 meters wide. It's actually shorter at about 5 meters tall. It's a two-hull design. Over here we have the cockpit with 2 lasers for defense. And on the port side we have 2 bomb missile launchers in the front. And then we also have a bomb bay or bomb chute behind that, because this was designed to be a surface assault, hence the SA and its name, Bomber. Although, of course, it could do space warfare too. After the success of the original TIE, these were put into production around 15 BBY, kind of used initially to mop up separatist pockets, assault, ground installations, kind of take out SAM sites or what have you. And from there, they were used to suppress the rebels. So yeah, they could carry quite a bit in ordnance. Standard was 4 proton torpedoes per launcher, but this could be increased to 6 by a mechanic. They could also carry concussion missiles, about 12 of those. Maybe up to 16, so I got a little tape there from the thing. Up to 16 concussion missiles with the modification. They could also carry rockets or heavy proton bombs. In the rear bay, they could carry thermal detonators or pretty much anything to deliver. Now, These were quite slow at about 900 kph in atmosphere. They did bend the solar collectors, the wings, to both give a little better maneuverability, a little better protection, and a little faster speed. And it was every bit needed because they were pretty slow. They did have reinforced hull armor, which was good because they were going to get hit. But typically these were covered by either starfighters or capital ships because otherwise they were a bit of a sitting duck. But they could deliver a heavy payload for their cost and size, and at least one wing of these was standard on any Star Destroyer. And they had very advanced targeting systems for what they were, but no shields, no hyperdrive. Interestingly, we saw this in Empire Strikes Back for the first time, being used as a bomber, but there were plans to use this in A New Hope as the TIE BN, or TIE boarding shuttle, and that was going to carry half a dozen stormtroopers. Instead of having the bomb bay in this pod, this was to be a cargo pod for people. It would have a cutting laser to cut on board ships, like we saw the Tantive 4 being boarded. So that was one option. We also saw it in Empire Strikes Back being used as a shuttle by Captain Nita, where it could carry 2 passengers. And that was called the TIE SH for TIE Shuttle. So yeah, there's some variants of it. And we actually saw the TIE SH on screen. I mean, we just saw a TIE bomber being used for that, but it counts. And I guess that's really the second TIE variant we see. Now this is moving quite forward to Rogue One and the Disney. This is the TIE SK, or TIE Striker. As you can see, it uses kind of a similar pod to the TIE Bomber in the center here, but only one of them. And then it has these giant solar collector wings that can pivot down. Because this was a specialty craft designed primarily to operate in atmosphere. These were stationed on planets to kind of fly guard in an atmosphere, or to kind of work as ground assault craft, or to be supply shuttles. Hence the kind of weird wing configuration. They're actually capable of vertical takeoff and landing and all that too, kind of neat, or even just hovering. They weren't very good in space. They could operate in space, but their assets were in atmosphere, and there they were quite fast, about 1500 kph. And they were quite well armed. They had 4 standard laser cannon and 2 heavy laser cannon, plus they had a bomb chute, a bomb bay, kind of a small version of what the TIE Bomber had. Alternatively, they could be reconfigured instead of having a bomb bay to carry up to 5 passengers, or a considerable amount of cargo, several tons. This is a pretty large craft. It's over 17 meters long and about 11 meters wide, but it's also very narrow at only about 3 meters tall. And while these could operate from starships, they were mostly meant to operate from ground, airfields, bases, that kind of thing. And we saw this in the Battle of Scarif. This was a standard production item, but a limited production item. Again, it was mostly stationed planet side. And we know they were definitely in widespread service before the Battle of Yavin. So not a cutting edge thing, but an interesting craft. Actually something I really like from the new one. Talking about these little ships, this one's from the old Titanium series. So it's all metal, wings, fuselage, and it does have a moving cockpit, for whatever that's worth. Kind of wish they wouldn't, but back then they were. But it's very chunky, very heavy, which is nice. And again, this one is from the Black series, which replaced the titanium. As you saw, it has moving wings, and they actually are metal. So that's nice. It's mostly metal. But it is very flat. The TIE bombers were used at Endor. And these were used again to defend shipyards, construction facilities, and were actually there when the rebels, later the New Republic, were taking over the Rathana shipyards. They were used to defend those. Moving on, we have kind of the first effort. And I knew that was going to happen. Bonk. Stop it. The first effort. Hey there. To replace the standard TIE fighter. This is the TIE Interceptor. And these were in limited production before Yavin, maybe 3 BBY, but did not hit full production till after Yavin, when the rebel threat was finally taken seriously. And this was an exercise in compromises, but it actually ended up being a good fighter. They needed something with more capability than the standard TIE, but they also needed to be able to mass produce them quickly and economically to outfit Star Destroyers across the galaxy and bases. And this is what they came up with. It's still an unshielded craft, although it does have a little bit better hull armor. It has more advanced sensors and targeting. Has better collectors and power source. But its main thing was the engines. It had improved ion engines to deliver more thrust, and it also had jets and nozzles to help with maneuverability. It was capable of achieving about 1300 kph. But more importantly, it was more maneuverable, and it was able to definitely outspeed the X-Wing, and while it wasn't as fast as the Rebels A-Wing, it gave it a run for its money. It wasn't shielded, but it used its speed and maneuverability and lower profile to get places. It's about 11 meters long, but it's slightly shorter than a regular TIE at about 7 meters, 6.5 maybe. Again, no life support, 1 crew, and it had a standard of 4 lasers, but if it were wired up for it and had enough power, it could actually support up to 6, 2 on the ball and then 1 on each wingtip. The real world reason is when they were doing Return of the Jedi, there was some goofs where they were showing it firing from the ball like a traditional TIE, and other times the wingtips, so, you know, up to 6 lasers, but again, 4 standard. Missiles and things weren't standard. So basically it was a faster, more heavily armed, slightly heavier armored TIE fighter. And they never got around to officially fully replacing all the TIEs with TIE interceptors, but they get about up to 20% of the fleet by the time of the Battle of Endor. So about 1 out of 5 TIEs were the newer, fancier interceptor. And of course they continue to see use at the Battle of Jakku in 5 ABY. And now finally the one that keeps tumping over, the TIE DG, the TIE Dagger. This is one of the last TIEs of the First Order or the Final Order or whatever. And it was designed to be a kind of a line starfighter. And again, to kind of replace the standard TIE FO and TIE SF. Has these big collectors. One thing all of these have in common, they all have hyperdrives. They also all have ordnance launchers. And they were all in limited production. And beginning, we have the TIE Advanced V1. This was the first effort to make something greater, kind of an elite TIE fighter. Work began several years before the Battle of Yavin, and they started to produce these, at least in advanced prototype form, by 4 BBY. This is an interesting craft because it has kind of different goals, different objectives. It has 2 laser cannons, and it has 1 ordnance launcher for missiles or micro proton torpedoes. It also features a hyperdrive, a class 4.5, and it's quite very fast at 1500, maybe even 1600 kph, and very maneuverable. It also features a basic shield, nothing fancy, but it can take a hit or two. It also has armored wings or collectors with the solar panels only on the inside. Because of this, it actually had to have a power cell for the engines, relying on the solar collectors for things like the sensors and partial weapons. It also could carry about a week's worth of consumables for the pilot, although I don't believe it had life support still. But another interesting feature, it was designed to be very compact, able to operate from smaller craft. It's only about 3.5 meters long and about 7 meters wide, and the wings, or the whatever you want to call these, fold in to make it very compact. As you can see, it's not much, taller than a person, able to fit pretty much anywhere. It's armored up, so its main advancements were a shield, a hyperdrive, lasers plus an ordnance launcher, and in a very compact little package. They would produce a number of these, but still, it wasn't a widespread thing. These were used by the Inquisitors, other elite forces, frontline forces. And an alternative design was the TIE Advanced X1. This is a different way. Instead of going compact, light, nimble, this was bigger and bulkier. It's about the same size of a TIE bomber, but longer. About 11 meters across, about 9. A little bit shorter than a standard TIE, about 7 meters. It has 2 laser cannon, and it has a slightly larger ordnance launcher. It has a faster hyperdrive at class 4, and it can store more jump ordnance. It also has more advanced targeting. It has a stronger shield, also more hull armor. It also has enough consumables for about a week. But the trade-off is it's slower. It's about 1200, 1250 kph. And not as maneuverable. So it's more durable, but not as maneuverable. And again, this was an alternative design. Work began sometime before the Battle of Yavin. It was underway by 3 BBY. This one, of course, is Darth Vader's TIE Advanced, and he took ownership of it around 1 BBY. It would be one of the few craft to survive the Battle of Yavin, the destruction of the Death Star, and it would be retrieved and repaired, getting more tape off, and kept on board the Executor. This would actually be there at the Battle of Hoth as well, and even would be on board the Executor when it was lost at Endor. Again, they never mass-produced these, only a few squadrons flew them, but it was kind of an alternative take to the V1. And production was over before indoor, but still some were flying around. The V1 here is from Black Series. As you see, it has the folding wings. It's pretty light because these are plastic. The ball is partially metal. But it's actually still neat. I like how small it is. This is from the old titanium, and it's heavy. It's big, too. It, too, has an opening hatch, I believe. Yeah. And the wings are metal. It's a chunk. I don't know why, but a lot of times when they do models or toys of this ship, it just seems very big. And now we move to the TIE D, the TIE Defender. This actually started off as being in the video game TIE Fighter, but eventually was brought into canon thanks to Season 3 of Rebels. In any case, this began as a project by Grand Admiral Thrawn, and would continue on from there. A definitely interesting looking design. This was designed to be a multi-role starfighter and kind of an advancement on the TIE Advanced. The idea was that one of these could replace 4 standard TIE fighters. Therefore, a flight of 4 of these was supposed to be equivalent to 16 TIE fighters, TIE line fighters. And of course, in the game, this was pretty much the ultimate ship. But anyway, as you notice, it has 3 sets of wings, and then a ball in the center, and engines in the back. There's at least 2 versions. One has 6 heavy lasers on the wingtips. Another has 4 heavy lasers and then 2 ion cannons, with the ions being on the top here. So there's that version. They also have 2 ordnance launchers here on the ball of the cockpit. One of the few TIEs to have that as standard. And they can carry 3 to 4 missiles per launcher or torpedoes. They have a pretty advanced shield. They have good hull armor. They're very fast. Initial versions could get up to about 1600 kph. Later versions could get up to nearly 1700. They also have a improved hyperdrive. It's a class 2, still with 10 jumps, same as the Advanced. They can also mount a miniature tractor beam for combat. And to help with maneuverability, they actually have exhaust nozzles on the wings to add additional thrust as well. So pretty advanced ship, but still no life support inside as far as I know. Work began around the same time as the TIE Advanced programs, around 3 BBY. They had some prototypes. Through various misadventures, they would kind of suspend the program for a while, starting it back up again right before the Battle of Hoth, after the loss of the Death Star. And this was really to combat newer Rebel fighters like the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, the B-Wing, all the wings. And they were in service well before Endor. They would build about 10,000 of these, but considering there were over 25,000 Star Destroyers, it goes to show you that they were still pretty uncommon. Onyx Squadron was maybe one of the more famous users. But production would end after Endor because the Empire just could not afford these anymore. They were just too expensive. But they would hang out. A few of them would be at Jakku. And many would continue on for decades. Because it did prove to be a very effective, very hard to kill craft. And it led to our final one here. The Thai VN, the Thai silencer. And this is from the sequel trilogy. This is the one that Kylo Ren flew. And this is yet again kind of another advanced starship for advanced pilots. Like I said, it has a hyperdrive. It's around a class 1.5. It has 4 standard laser cannons, 2 heavy laser cannons. It has 2 ordnance launchers capable of mag pulses, proton torpedoes, or concussion missiles. It has shielding, and it actually has some stealth capabilities. The first one here that has a bit of a, not exactly a cloaking system, but a bit of a stealth drive. It even has engines designed to be quieter in an atmosphere. It's pretty big too. It's 17 meters tip to tip, pretty roomy cockpit with a very good field of view, and it's fast. It's the one that's even faster than the Thai Defender at over 1800 kph in atmosphere, of course. So this is definitely the most advanced Thai we see in the series. It just kind of started off with the Thai Defender, drawing upon it. Also some of the new power management tech from the Thai Special Forces, the Thai SF, and just kind of made its own version of the Thai Advanced. So yeah, this one here is from the old Titanium series, and this one is from the Hot Wheels. Pretty heavy here. It's pretty big size, frankly. The wings are partial plastic and the middle metal. Kind of neat. So there are our advanced ties. None of these were huge production numbers, but they weren't one-offs either. Well, I hope you enjoyed this overview look at 12 TIE fighters. It's pretty much all of them we've seen in canon. There's a couple missing, but that's the big ones. Of course, in the original movie, we saw the TIE fighter and the TIE Advanced. Then Empire brought us the TIE Bomber. Return of the Jedi brought us the Interceptor. And from there, it kind of expanded out with the TIE Defender coming in the wilderness years of the 90s. And then the other ones coming through the Disney era. Running through pretty much all of those films. And there's something to be said for the Titanium versus the Black Series Titanium versus the Hot Wheels. Each of them kind of has its pros and cons, but these are relatively inexpensive. That's kind of fun about them. And just gives you a neat little kind of overview and look. So let me know which ones you like or hate in the comments, and we'll talk some ties. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon. Next time.